So in this video, I would like to explain impersonal and special constructions with object pronouns in the dative case in Russian. In my first videos about Russian, I explained the grammatical ideas of the dative, but the smaller concepts of the dative are something that I did not cover, because to fully understand them, you first need to understand object pronouns in Russian. I already made a video talking about object pronouns in Russian, so aside from directness or indirectness, in this video, I'll explain the dative case more specifically to show how object pronouns must be used in it. These are the main concepts that I showed in my first video about the dative, but I never fully explained them. Now, I can finally explain them because these concepts utilize object pronouns. As a reminder, the dative answers to what and to whom, and its main function is direction, expressing something to someone. Direction in the dative always means to something or to someone, which ultimately makes the questions to what and to whom. This means that object pronouns in the dative will always have the preposition to before them. And in case you forgot, here are the object pronouns in the dative in Russian. Мне doesn't simply mean me, it means to me. Тебе doesn't simply mean you, it means to you, and so on. The reason why I'm providing this explanation is because to fully understand the dative, we always have to ask to what and to whom. The dative is a special case in Russian because by asking to what and to whom, we simplify the learning process so that it's simpler to understand. Unlike the genitive from the previous video, in the dative, I will ask the questions in every example that I give. Anyhow, aside from direction, the dative also has the following uses: emotional and physical states, conjunctive verbs, addressing, age, and special prepositions. Let's begin with emotional and physical states. Emotional and physical states indicate the state of a subject which expresses feelings. These states always correlate to what and to whom, because they always point to a direction, and they always work with object pronouns in the dative. Here are some examples. Мне холодно. I am cold. Мне жарко. I am hot. Мне скучно. I am bored. And мне грустно. I am sad. Again, let's not forget that the reason why these adjectives are used in the dative is because they already show a form of direction, and you're about to see why. As a side note, I'll obviously not list every adjective in the dative, but you get the idea. At first glance, there isn't a big difference between the grammar in English and Russian. In English, we use a personal pronoun, the corresponding verb, and then the adjective. In Russian, we use an object pronoun and then an adjective. Just by looking at the phrases in Russian, it doesn't make sense that these are the translations, because the construction is different, so the way of expressing states is visually and meaningfully not the same as in English. The true meaning behind emotional and physical states is that they don't necessarily use personal pronouns in Russian. Instead, what they really mean is, to me, it's cold, it's hot, it's boring, and it's sad. This is a more logical explanation than simply saying, I am cold. Of course, nobody speaks like this, so we need a better translation, like, I am cold. Мне холодно. We can further prove that these states are in the dative by asking, Кому холодно? To whom is it cold? Мне холодно. To me, it's cold. If suppose we ask, Что холодно? What is cold? Then we're asking what's cold in general, like a cold object. Even then, it will be the nominative, but in this lesson, we're focusing on the dative. Anyhow, this is how emotional and physical states work with object pronouns in the dative. Still, these adjectives are not the only way to show a state in the dative. We can use reflexive verbs to show how we feel. Even though it's a topic for a future video, using one useful verb will not hurt anybody, and just from one verb, we can make many sentences. For instance, Russian has the verb nравится, which means to like. It's a reflexive verb because it ends in sa, and also because you apply it to yourself. Still, this is a very important verb that can be used in the dative, and it only has two conjugations, singular and plural. And we can say the following phrases. Мне нравится, тебе нравится, ему нравится, ей нравится, нам нравится, вам нравится, and им нравится. Once again, just by looking at the phrases in Russian, it doesn't make sense that these are the translations, because the construction is different. The true meaning behind this verb is that it doesn't necessarily use personal pronouns in Russian. Instead, what it really means is to me, to you, to him, her, us, y'all, and them, it's likable. This is a more logical explanation than simply saying, I like. Of course, nobody speaks like this, so we need a better translation. Like, I like. Мне нравится. We can further extend the verb by using a singular noun, like Мне нравится Лас-Вегас. Тебе нравится Лас-Вегас, and so on. It doesn't mean I like Las Vegas as much as to me Las Vegas is likable. And we can check to see if it's the dative by asking Кому нравится Лас-Вегас? To whom is Las Vegas likable? Мне нравится Лас-Вегас. To me, Las Vegas is likable. Because Russian is expressive, we can rephrase the sentence so it's similar to English. Лас-Вегас нравится кому? Las-Vegas нравится мне. Las Vegas is likable to whom? Las Vegas is likable to me. Now, to express this verb in the plural, it will look like this. Мне нравятся собаки. Тебе нравятся собаки, and so on. In this case, нравится changes to нравятся, so it's a one-letter change. As always, we ask Кому нравятся собаки? Мне нравятся собаки. To whom are dogs likable? To me, dogs are likable. If you want, you can rephrase the sentence to match the order of the words as in English. Still, нравится is not the only verb that's used with emotional and physical states. There's also this verb, нужно, which means to need. The verb нужно is very useful to know in the dative because it gives an emotional desire, expressing a need. What's tricky about нужно is that it changes under gender and plurality, yet it still uses object pronouns and maintains the regular dative grammar and questions. Here is an example in the masculine. Мне нужен стол. I need a table. Нужно changes to нужен to fit the masculine noun стол. This phrase doesn't really mean I need a table as much as to me a table is needed. Стол нужен кому? Стол нужен мне. A table is needed to whom? A table is needed to me. It's also possible to rephrase it, but nobody speaks like this. That's why we need a better translation, like I need a table. Here is an example in the feminine. Мне нужна машина. I need a car. Нужно changes to нужна to fit the feminine noun машина. It doesn't really mean I need a car as much as to me a car is needed. Машина нужна кому? Машина нужна мне. A car is needed to whom? A car is needed to me. Here is an example in the neuter. Мне нужно окно. I need a window. Нужно stays нужно to fit the neuter noun окно. It doesn't really mean I need a window as much as to me a window is needed. Окно нужно кому? Окно нужно мне. A window is needed to whom? A window is needed to me. Here is a plural example. Мне нужны документы. I need documents. Нужно changes to нужны to fit the plurality, regardless of the noun's gender. It doesn't really mean I need documents as much as, to me, documents are needed. Документы нужны кому? Документы нужны мне. Documents are needed to whom? Documents are needed to me. This is how states fully work with object pronouns in the dative. Essentially, emotional and physical states are not the only function of the dative. There are conjunctive verbs, addressing, age, and special prepositions. Let's continue with conjunctive verbs. Conjunctive verbs in Russian are verbs that already connect to the dative by showing direction to something or someone, again by asking to what and to whom. Of course, I will not list every verb that there is, but common ones are идти к, to go to, звонить, to call to, and давать, to give to. All of these verbs are special because they all connect to some form of direction, with the simplest one being идти к. The most common examples can be Адам идет ко мне, Adam идет к тебе, and these are examples that I gave in the previous videos. Still, presenting them now is more valuable because we can now ask Адам идет к кому? Adam идет ко мне, к тебе, and so on. Here's the verb звонить. Адам звонит мне, Adam звонит тебе, and so on. The verb звонить is associated with direction because we can ask Adam звонит кому? Adam звонит мне. Adam calls to whom? Adam calls to me. Here is the verb давать. Адам дает мне. Adam дает тебе, and so on. I already gave these examples, but presenting them now is better because we can ask Adam дает кому? Adam дает мне. Adam gives to whom? Adam gives to me. This is how object pronouns work with conjunctive verbs in the dative in Russian. Furthermore, the dative has two more functions under which object pronouns can be used, and these are addresses and age. Now, before fully explaining them, this is where I would like to show a specific category of the dative under which every other concept falls, and it's called a subjective function with impersonal construction. This category has emotional and physical states and conjunctive verbs under impersonal construction by using object pronouns to describe subjects. For instance, saying Adam calls me signifies an impersonal construction because we're using a conjunctive verb to call along with a dative object pronoun. Also, me is the object to whom something is addressed, which is where you get this function. Adam calls to whom? Adam calls me. Adam звонит кому? Adam звонит мне. A different example can be ему нужна помощь. He needs help. In this case, we have a verb in an emotional state, and also we're using the feminine нужна to fit the feminine noun помощь. It doesn't really mean he needs help as much as to him help is needed. If you want, you can rephrase the words so it's similar to English. Помощь нужна кому? Помощь нужна ему. Help is needed to whom? Help is needed to him. In addition, ему is the object to whom something is addressed. This is how addressing works in the dative with object pronouns. Here, we have the concept of age, and it can be tricky because the word years can change under cardinal numbers. For instance, if I say, he is 2, 3, or 4 years old, the phrase will be ему 2, 3 или 4 года. It doesn't really mean he is 2 years old as much as to him it's 2 years. We can also ask кому 2 года? Ему 2 года. To whom is it 2 years? To him it's 2 years. That's the first concept of age, and it can be used with any other object pronoun. However, when using numbers above 5, the word года changes to лет, and it's done on purpose because of cardinal numbers above 5, which in this case changes the word completely. Let's use my age as an example. Мне 20 лет. It doesn't really mean I am 20 years old as much as to me it's 20 years. We can also ask кому 20 лет? Мне 20 лет. To whom is it 20 years? To me, it's 20 years. That's how age works in the dative with object pronouns. Finally, the last use of the dative with object pronouns is special prepositions that already correlate to direction. Aside from the preposition к, meaning to, the dative uses other prepositions that connect to direction, even when putting them in English. Of course, I will not list every preposition, but you get the idea. Two common ones are благодаря, meaning thanks to, and согласно, according to. And here are some examples. Я выиграл благодаря ему. I won thanks to him. This sentence correctly translates to English. At the same time, we can ask Я выиграл благодаря кому? Я выиграл благодаря ему. I won thanks to whom? I won thanks to him. Here's another example. Согласно мне, ты проиграл. According to me, you lost. This sentence also correctly translates to English. We can also ask согласно кому ты проиграл? Согласно мне, ты проиграл. According to whom did you lose? According to me, you lost. This is how special prepositions work in the dative with object pronouns. In conclusion, this is how impersonal constructions work in the dative in Russian. Always remember that in the dative, every concept connects to direction, just in different forms. Every concept that I showed throughout the video can somehow be linked to direction. Direction relates to the dative using verbs. Emotional and physical states relate to direction using adjectives and object pronouns. Conjunctive verbs relate to direction using verbs that already have a directional connotation. Age relates to direction using an impersonal construction, and special prepositions are special in the dative because they relate to some form of direction.